UFC 294 is this weekend. I'm going to give you a prediction breakdown of all 13 fights on this card, starting with Bruno Silva versus Sharabutdin Magomedov. And if you are not familiar with, I guess, the regional scene, Sharabutdin Magomedov is a pretty hyped up guy coming into this fight. I think you have seen some memes going around with him, is like you make your UFC debut, or you make your debut in MMA and you get this guy like Khabib Magomedov, like OV name, and then they show this guy with his eye and everything like that. So he has been shown around quite a bit. Like if you've seen him, you'll recognize him. If you're familiar, like a casual fan maybe has seen like a meme with him or whatever. But Sharabutdin Magomedov is a really solid prospect, and I'm actually kind of excited to see what he looks like against a pretty solid fighter in Bruno Silva as well, especially at middleweight. Bruno Silva has definitely shown himself to be really good in that division. Like Alex Pereira, that fight was pretty close. Beat Jordan Ryan. I'm not going to talk about that one, but the Alex Pereira fight, I think he took a round from Alex Pereira in that one, made it pretty much a war with Pereira. Probably the most competitive fight anyone has put up against Pereira in his whole entire career at middleweight. I'll say at middleweight because he pretty much ran through everybody except for Israel Adesanya in that. The first and second fight was actually pretty competitive, but outside of the light heavyweight fight, of course, this was one of his most competitive fights for sure. He's taken all the shots off of Pereira till like the end of the fight, where there's a certain amount of damage you can take. Then lost to GM3, which is a really rough loss to have. Really rough loss to have. I was actually expecting him to beat that one. I was pretty pissed when he didn't, but it is GM3, so it is what it is. Beat Brad Tavares, which I was not expecting. I was actually really surprised that he did kind of just KO Brad Tavares, because it is really hard to KO Brad Tavares, especially I guess at this point in his career. I guess it's a little bit more likely that you may get a finish over a guy in Brad Tavares who's super tough and a really solid fighter at middleweight, but looked pretty impressive there. But then lost to Brendan Allen, who's likely in the top 10 of the middleweight division. I'm not sure where he's exactly at right now, but he has shown to be very good, especially a very high level unranked fighter in the middleweight division. So I am really excited to see this match, and I am going to go with Sharabutdin Magomedov in this one. But I think Bruno Silva does have a little bit of a chance. This is why I think this is a really good matchup to have, especially as his debut opponent, because you really get to see a lot out of Sharabutdin Magomedov in his debut. He's really slick on the feet. A lot of his kicks kind of just like, he's just very slick with it. Like, it looks easy. Like, they just fling up. And I think he can catch Bruno Silva in this matchup. Maybe it doesn't get to decision. Yeah, I don't see it going to decision. I think he actually does get the finish here. It is his debut. It's going to be in Abu Dhabi. The crowd's going to be behind him. Really big debut opponent here. I think he gets the finish probably in the late first round here. I think he ends up getting a finish over Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva has taken quite a bit of damage. Took a lot of damage against Pereira, GM3, Brad Tavares, I'm not sure if he even took too much damage, but in that Brendan Allen fight, he did take quite a bit of damage. He actually got caught in that matchup. So I'm going to go with Sharabutdin Magomedov by TKO KO. I think he does catch him with a kick, probably in the later half of that first round. I think he does finish him there. I think he really works on him in this matchup. I think a lot of people really get to see what Sharabutdin Magomedov looks like against a very high-level opponent in the UFC. So really excited to see that one. 83% picked by Tapology. I'm doing the same here with Sharabutdin Magomedov first round. Up the card, we have Jinh Frey versus Victoria Dudakova. I am going to go with Victoria Dudakova. I'm not going to talk about this one too crazy, but she is minus 375 odds. Jinh Frey is 38 years of age. Victoria Dudakova is 24 years of age. And I know in her last fight, she did get a good win over Estela Nunes on paper, but she did dislocate her elbow. And it's kind of a rough one to see, because Estela Nunes, I thought, was actually a very solid fighter in the UFC, or at least for women's MMA just coming up. She's a decent fighter. You would probably be able to learn quite a bit from her. So she did get the win there, but it's not quite how you want to see, especially on like both parties. I'm sure Dudakova didn't want to see that. And fans, if you're into women's MMA, which I'm not quite into women's MMA, I'm into higher level women's MMA, but like it was kind of rough to see. So it was a pretty brutal dislocation as well. But I am going to go with Dudakova. She's a younger fighter, and I think she's a little bit more skilled than Jinh Frey. He's lost to Elise Reed by decision, Polyana Viana by KO, and Vanessa Demopoulos by split decision, even though she probably won that fight. I don't even know what Vanessa Demopoulos at this point. She just gets gifted decisions out of the wazoo and shit. So I'm going to go with Victoria Dudakova, probably by decision. She could get the submission, but I think it's safe to say a women's MMA fight probably goes to a decision. Up the card, we have Nathaniel Wood versus Mohammad Naimov. This is a really interesting one because we saw Muhammad Naimov make his UFC debut against Jamie Mullarkey, where he did get the finish over Jamie Mullarkey, who's actually a pretty high-level opponent at 155. It was, again, a late short notice fight where he did have to move up to 155 to make that fight. Now he's moving down to 145 at his actual division and taking on a really good prospect in Nathaniel Wood. Can you really call him a prospect at this point? He is I guess on realistic terms, he is a prospect because he isn't actually like a high-ranked dude. He's not up there yet, but he's actually a very high-level fighter in the UFC, especially at 145. Probably just right outside the top 15. Honestly, I'm not sure if he's actually ranked on the UFC rankings, but again, Tapology has him number 17 featherweight in the world. So I am going to go with Nathaniel Wood. This one does kind of make me a little uneasy, though, because we know, I don't know why in my brain, for some of these UK fighters, I feel like their chins are not the greatest, and Muhammad Naimov does have a lot of power. Although I think Nathaniel Wood would be a little bit more technical, I think he can really tear up the legs of Naimov in this one, and then just kind of break him down a little bit more here. I don't think Naimov will take him down. If anything, I think Nathaniel Wood does have the ability to maybe make those clinch game and ground game a little bit interesting in this match, because I think Mullarkey actually took down Naimov in his last fight, if I remember correctly, but we'll see how this one goes. I am a little bit worried about this one. I'm going to be completely honest. I can just see Naimov just like somehow just landing a hook on Nathaniel Wood and Nathaniel Wood getting dropped and then just getting pounded out by TKO strikes in like the first or second round. So I am a little bit nervous about that, but I am going to go with Nathaniel Wood. Has really good wins. Just came off a win against Andre Philly by decision. Charles Jourdain, or Jourdain is how you say his name now, by decision, which is actually looking like a really good win. And then Charles Rosa lost to Casey Kenny about 3 years ago, and beat John Castaneda 3 years ago. So I'm gonna go with Nathaniel Wood. I think he, as a UFC quality opponent, I think he's higher up there than Naimov at this point. I think Naimov at 145 has yet to be seen in the UFC, and I'm a little bit more comfortable with Nathaniel Wood. But again, Naimov can catch him on the chin. I'm a little bit worried about that, but I'm gonna stick with Wood in this one. I don't know if he gets the finish. I think he does get the decision. He's not like the kind of guy that's gonna get a crazy finish or anything like that. He's definitely gonna make it pretty interesting. But again, Wood by decision, 82% picked by Tapology. I agree with this one. Up the card, we have Anshul Jubli versus Mike Breeden. I am going to go with Anshul Jubli, a really big prospect out of India. I think when I made my prospects to watch video, I think I had quite a few people mention Anshul Jubli like to include him, but I said, I don't know. He hasn't had too many fights in the UFC. I don't necessarily know where he's at, but again, he's actually a very good, solid fighter, and Mike Breeden is not. He lost to Terrence McKinney by KO in his last fight, lost to Nathaniel Levy by decision, lost to Alexander Hernandez by KO. That was all his fights in the UFC before then. Beat Nick Compton by decision, 12-8 opponent. Beat Ken Beverly by 9-5 opponent. He hasn't fought the best of guys in the UFC, and he's lost to all of them. So, these are obviously some names, but we're talking mid-range, unranked opponents to a little bit lower level, which I'll actually just say mid-level because Alexander Hernandez has some decent wins. Nathaniel Levy is decent, and Terrence McKinney is kind of hot and cold at certain points. But Anshul Jubli is a very good fighter. Showed that against Jaka Sergey and got a really nice KO in that matchup on the what did they call it? Road to UFC. So the Road to UFC final. So he did look really good. 28 years of age as well. Pretty young. I think probably the biggest prospect out of India at this point. I think the UFC just signed another Indian fighter that's like a woman's fighter. So we'll see what happens there, how she does. But I think Anshul Jubli does get the finish in the first round by KO. Tapology saying the same thing. 95% picked by 95% picked by Tapology here. 5% for Breeden. Really, are we really doing that? I don't know why people are picking Mike Breeden. I think that's insane. 66% by TKO KO, 20% by decision. I think Anshul Jubli gets the finish. I think he's actually a very good fighter, and Breeden is not. And he's losing by finish to these really, I won't want to say good, but I will say to more of these guys that are known a little bit for their finishes. Like Alexander Hernandez, known for his first round abilities, just going out there, balls to the walls in the first round, getting to that finish or getting finished in the later rounds. Same thing with Terrence McKinney. So I think Anshul Jubli has the finishing ability to take out Mike Breeden in the first round. Of the card, we have Sedriques Dumas versus Abu Azaitar. Oh my God, I almost messed that one up. But I'm going to go with Sedriques Dumas. I'm kind of 50-50 on whether I think it's going to be a KO or submission, but I do think he gets the finish in this one. Abu Azaitar has not fought in 2.5 years, and his last fight was a loss to Marc-Andre Barriault. Beat Vitor Morena And that's pretty much it. Like, he had 2 fights and then took a 2.5-year layoff. 37 years of age. Sedriques Dumas didn't look horrible in his last fight. Like, he looked really bad against Josh Fremd, and I didn't think Josh Fremd was that good anyways. So that was a little bit worrying. And then I chose Cody Brundage against him, and then he beat Cody Brundage by decision. Said he took his career a little bit more seriously. So I'm going to ride with him on this one. I think he... maybe I'll say like he drops him and then hops on his back and gets the rear naked choke or something like that. I don't know. He does have a 3-inch reach advantage. I just think he gets this one probably done in the first or second round by finish. Again, 50-50 on submissions and KOs. He definitely has those abilities in his pocket. Again, still very young. 79% picked by Tapology. Tapology's kind of 50-50. Well, they're not saying submission. I guess he does have some submission ability. Like, I think he did out-wrestle Cody Brundage in his last fight. And he didn't do too well against Josh Fremd, I guess. So maybe not quite submission. I can just see him hopping on his back and getting the rear naked choke, though. So maybe I'll just stay with TKO to KO. I'm not going to get super specific in it. I do think he gets the finish, though. So I can count on that. I'm not confident on how he gets it done because I can't see him submitting him. Just knocking him down and hopping on him. But 38% by KO, TKO, 51% by decision, and 79% picked by Tapology. Again, first or second round finish for Dumas in this one. Up the card, we Javid Basharat versus Victor Henry. I am going to go with Javid Basharat on this one. I think this one is actually a really interesting matchup if you would have asked me, how was it, about a year ago? Because when Victor Henry made his UFC debut, he beat Raoni Barcelos by decision. And honestly, I rated Raoni Barcelos pretty highly, especially a year and a half ago before he got KO'd by Umar Nurmagomedov, like put out cold, flatline. Even at this point, Raoni Barcelos is a very, very solid fighter. And the fact that he beat him by decision, I think said a lot about Victor Henry coming in, 16-2 record too. So I thought he was like, okay, this guy's kind of legit. And then he went on to lose to an aging Rafael Assunção, which was doing good against Davey Grant, I guess. So I guess Assunção isn't completely trash, but like, if you're beating Raoni Barcelos, you really shouldn't be losing to Rafael Assunção and then beat Tony Gravely by split decision. So Victor Henry, I'm not looking at him too highly at this point. Javid Basharat, I am though. The Basharat brothers are legit. They have a lot of skill. Rafael Assunção, who did have Eric Nixick in his corner in his last fight, will have Javid Basharat. I think Eric Nixick, I'm not sure if he flew out with Javid Basharat, but I know they train at Extreme Couture, so maybe they got a good game plan for Victor Henry. I don't know, but Javid Basharat beat Tony Gravely by decision. Victor Henry beat Tony Gravely by split decision. So if you want to use a little bit of MMA math that way, beat Trevor Jones by decision, beat Mateus Mendonça by decision. So he's looked really good in those fights. He isn't like his brother. I think his brother just got to finish his last fight. So he's not like his brother in that way. I guess these Basharat brothers really need to start stacking up the finishes. They don't need to, but they are very skilled. This should be a very entertaining fight. I think Basharat is just going to be a little bit too much for him on the feet. And then maybe if he wants to get it to the ground, it will get a little bit interesting. But I think he just completely outstrikes him on the feet, probably by a decision. Minus 425 favorite. Victor Henry is 36.5 years of age. Even then, if he's like 33, I still probably would have went with Javid Basharat. So Basharat is just a lot more skilled. The Basharat brothers are guys to look out for in the UFC. So I'm really kind of excited to see what Javid Basharat looks like in this matchup. We haven't seen him in a little bit. It's been 8 months, so I kind of want to see what he has improved. Just turned 28 as well, so it's still really young. But 95% picked by Tapology, 79% by decision. Again, that finishing ability hasn't really been shown in the UFC, so we'll see if he can get the finish against Victor Henry, who is getting a little bit older, so we'll see what happens in that one. Up the card, we have Muhammad Yahya versus Trevor Peek. This is such a random fight to put on this card. Like, you have a lot of these Russian guys, Dagestani guys, or you'll have your where exactly is Naimov from? I know they made a pretty big, oh yeah, Tajikistan. Like, they have all these kind of guys on this card, and then you have Trevor Peek versus Muhammad Yahya. So I think that's pretty interesting. Like, I don't know, just from outside looking in, but I am going to go with Trevor Peek. I really like Trevor Peek. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch at this point. He did lose to Chepe Mariscal, which was a pretty rough one to see. I mean, it is what it is. He took a lot of damage in the fight before. Absolutely crazy fight against Eric Gonzalez. Same thing with Malik Lewis. Like, the dude just puts on insane performances. I mean, you can see that he's gassed or something like that, and he still keeps throwing. Like, it's absolutely crazy. For Muhammad Yahya, I know he's making his UFC debut. He doesn't look that great, though. Like, in his last fight, barely beat like a 5-3 opponent in his last fight, which isn't something you want to really see. Like, that one to a decision. I think in the first round he knocked the guy down, and the guy came back and knocked him down. And the guy kind of knocked him down with like a super wide hook too, and that's all Trevor Peek throws. He'll just start wailing punches and a standing hammer fist, which patented by Trevor Peek at this point. So I am going to go Trevor Peek. That power is just insane. I don't see Yahya taking him down. Trevor Peek has really good takedown defense. And I think Yahya is definitely open on the feet to where he can get caught. So he is a minus 115 guy in this one. I don't know what the odds are looking like now. They're probably kind of even. Maybe Trevor Peek is a little bit higher, like a minus 140. I don't know. I don't have the odds up on the screen right now. But Yahya will have a 3-inch reach advantage. I don't know how much that will help him in this matchup, but I am going to go with Trevor Peek by KO in the first round. If not, probably the second round. It'll probably be late first round. If he doesn't get it, I'll probably say early second round for Trevor Peek, but I'm going to say late first round a little bit more confidently than the second round. So Trevor Peek, 58% picked by Tapology here, 82% by TKO KO, 12% by decision. I don't know. I'm going to be really looking forward to this matchup. I really do like Trevor Peek. He's a really fun fighter to watch, and I really hope he gets a win. I don't want to see him get cut. He has a really good story as well. 28 years of age. Shouldn't be taking as much damage as he does, but again, just extremely fun fighter to watch. So looking forward to it. We have Tim Elliott versus Muhammad Mokaev. I am going to go with Muhammad Mokaev. If you would have asked me maybe about a year ago who would win this matchup, I'd probably say Tim Elliott. But Tim Elliott had his last fight, he didn't look too great. I'm going to be completely honest. Like, he's not. I don't think he's necessarily the same guy that beat Tagir Ulanbekov, where he did cheat a bunch in that matchup and ended up getting the finish. Not the finish, sorry. The win over Tagir Ulanbekov and got Khabib all angry in the corner and all that. If you've seen that video where he's just getting pissed in the corner, because he was cheating quite a bit in that matchup. So, but Tim Elliott, 36 years of age, 9 months as well. So add that on there, 36 3/4 old there. Didn't look too great against Victor Altamirano. And Altamirano, I don't rate him very highly. Like, I did pick him to beat him, but he did not look that great. And I think a guy like Muhammad Mokaev is definitely going to give him some problems, especially, like, I don't think Tim Elliott can rely on his wrestling in this matchup, because Mokaev is pretty good on the ground. I don't think he has the finish, like the submission ability on the ground to catch Mokaev in anything. And even Mokaev as a prospect, I've been kind of iffy on him. I feel like he's gotten a lot of hype, but I think they should slow it down a little bit more, which is what they're doing. Like, I think he's a pretty high-ranked flyweight at this point for a guy that hasn't fought a ranked flyweight at all. And I don't know if Cody Durden's ranked at this point, but got the knee against Cody Durden, got the submission on him. And then Charles Johnson, that one was a little bit rough because Charles Johnson had good takedown defense, made it pretty competitive there. I think that was his debut, was against Mokaev. And then Malcolm Gordon, that one was a little bit competitive till he got the finish towards the end there. And the Rafael Phil almost got him in like a knee bar or whatever, and pretty much screwed up his knee. So I don't rate Mokaev too highly at this point. I think eventually, maybe in a few years, he'll actually be something at flyweight, and I think he'll be actually really good. But at this point, I am going to go with Mokaev. I think he has the ground game to kind of counter Tim Elliott in this one, and I don't think Tim Elliott will be able to establish some control on him. But on the feet, I do think Mokaev, at least since his last fight, like, his stand-up did not look that great against Rafael Phil, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it's going to be a little bit better than Tim Elliott's at this point. So I am going to have to go with Muhammad Mokaev, 4-inch reach advantage as well. I think he can do decent on the feet here. I don't think he gets the finish. I think this one goes to a decision. People are saying submission, which I think is really interesting. I don't know if he gets the sub on Tim Elliott. So I am going to go with the decision. Maybe he gets like a really late round submission. When was the last time he went to a decision? Was that the Phil Ho fight? He got the finish. There was the Charles Johnson fight that went to a decision. So he's getting a lot of finishes in his career. I just don't think he gets it against Tim Elliott. Tim Elliott's a little bit savvy, one of those savvy veterans in the UFC at flyweight. So I don't know if he gets finished here. Maybe he does end up getting submitted through the late part of this fight, which I think a lot of people are saying is apology, but I don't know if Mokaev gets that. So I'm going to go with Mokaev by decision, 87% picked by Tapology. Again, I think he's just going to be the younger guy. Tim Elliott didn't look that great in his last fight either. So let's move on. Up the card, we have Saeed Nurmagomedov versus Muin Gafurov. I am going to go with Saeed Nurmagomedov. We haven't seen him in 6 months, which is a little bit of a lengthier time. He's 31 and a half years of age, so he's not super old. Like, he's in his prime of his career. He's a very good fighter, very high-paced fighter, good on the feet, decent on the ground. No, I won't say decent. He's good on the ground, good submission ability as well. I believe he got the submission over Cody Stamen I think that was like a standing guillotine too. That was actually pretty impressive because of how fast it was. Cody Stamann went for a takedown, but beat Douglas Silva de Andrade as well by decision. Beat Saidyokov Kakhramonov by submission, which was actually a really good win. I don't know what happened to Saidyokov. I haven't been keeping up with him. Maybe I should check him out in a little bit, see if how he's doing fighting, which I thought was kind of weird that he got cut anyways. But outside of that, lost to Jonathan Martinez in the last fight. So we'll see how he rebounds after that one. But Muin Gafurov lost to John Castaneda in his debut. Lost that one by decision. And then also lost to Chad Anhelinger by split decision on the Contender Series. So I'm not really... I don't think Muin Gafurov is going to be the kind of guy that will beat Said Nurmagomedov, like just how we saw. I think Jonathan Martinez was fighting a week ago and just beat... what's his name? Why am I drawing a blank here? Oh boy, this is going to be a problem. Hopefully I can think about this. Oh no, this is going to be a problem. Adrian Yanez, there you go. I didn't have to look it up. Adrian Yanez, he just beat him. Looked pretty impressive there as well. So I think Jonathan Martinez is a very high-level opponent, and you see Said Nurmagomedov beating these lower-ranked, lower-level bantamweights. So I do think he does beat Muin Gafurov, and even then, like Saidyokov Kakhramonov, good fighter. Douglas Silva de Andrade, all right fighter. Cody Stamann's kind of the same thing as well. So he is beating these very solid fighters that are unranked, and Muin Gafurov has shown that he can't beat those kind of fighters. So I'm going to go with Said Nurmagomedov in this one. I don't know if he gets the finish. I'll say probably by decision, 95% pick by Tapology, 62% by decision, 23% by submission. I do agree with the decision part on this one. I don't think he gets the finish over Muin Gafurov. Muin Gafurov's kind of tough, so I'm going to go with Said Nurmagomedov. Of the card, we have Ikram Aliskerov versus Warlley Alves. I am going to go with Ikram Aliskerov. I was probably going to pick Nasruddin Imavov to beat Ikram Aliskerov because I think he did look a little bit rough at the beginning of that Phil Haas fight, and you have seen him get KO'd by... what's his name? Khamzat Chimaev, so like way super long ago. So he's a prospect in his own right, almost 31 years of age already. But when he made his the Contender Series debut about a year ago, he's like 29 years of age. So he is getting a little bit older now, entering his prime of his career. So we'll see what he can do. Again, got that really nice KO against Phil Haas. I think put him out stiff. But Warlley Alves is getting older. I mean, he's been in the UFC for quite a bit. I feel like he's gotten older. Like he's been in the UFC for a pretty long time at this point. But he's 32 years of age. Just lost to Nicholas Dalby by split decision. Lost to Jeremiah Wells by KO. Beat Munir Lazez by TKO. Lost to Randy Brown. So he's losing to these high-level fighters, or at least decently high-level. I guess Nicholas Dalby is out there a little bit, maybe kind of in this similar spot, like mid-range, unranked middleweight or welterweight. Jeremiah Wells, higher-level, unranked welterweight. Munir Lazez, he beat him. And then same thing with Randy Brown, just like higher level welterweight as well. But I think Ikram Aliskerov, especially at 185, I think will do really well against Warlley Alves. I don't know if he gets the finish, which is why I think this one will be interesting. Maybe he gets the finish in like the second or third round because, yeah, I'll go to TKO KO in the second or third round. I think as this fight goes on, it'll definitely benefit Ikram Aliskerov. I think early on, maybe Warlley Alves will look decent. But again, I think Ikram Aliskerov is just going to look really good on the feet. Going to be able to catch Warlley Alves, and if it does go to the ground, I think he does have the ability to beat up Warlley Alves on the ground and control the fight there. So I am going to go with Ikram Aliskerov in this matchup. What is this, a 4-inch reach advantage as well? I'm going to pick him in this one. Tapology is picking Aliskerov 63% by KO, 19% by submission, and 10% by decision, 97% overall. A lot more people are picking Aliskerov than what was the fight we were looking at? It was the Mike Breeden fight. Anshul Jubli versus Mike Breeden. 5% of people are taking Mike Breeden, which is kind of interesting, but 97% are taking Aliskerov. I guess this one, I guess you can count on a little bit more since we've seen Warlley Alves for a while now, but I'm going to go with Ikram Aliskerov by TKO, probably in the second or third round. He's very good on the feet. I can just see him catching Warlley Alves in the second or third round. Don't think the first round. Maybe I could be a little bit wrong there, but Warlley Alves is durable enough to make it out of that first round. I think just as this fight goes on, Aliskerov will make some reads, definitely mix in a little bit of the takedowns to get Warlley Alves thinking, and then just end up catching him on the feet. So let's move on. Up the card, we have Magomedov Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. This is a very interesting one, just because as a bettor, I am looking at Johnny Walker in this fight to put as like an underdog pick. I'm going to be completely honest, like plus 270 for Johnny Walker is, I don't want to say it's a steal, but it's definitely an intriguing one for this matchup. So I am going to go with Magomedov Ankalaev. He does have a decent ability on the feet just to control the pace of a fight, and I think he can definitely do that against Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker, though, is extremely athletic. He doesn't really have a chin, which I don't know if Magomed Ankalaev is going to catch him. I think a lot of people in Tapology think Magomed Ankalaev is just going to end up catching Johnny Walker on the feet, and he has shown to put a little bit more into his strikes, like that fight against Jan Blachowicz. He did look decent in the second half of that fight, kind of relied on his wrestling a little bit more. I think it was a draw in my mind. I guess you kind of could have edged it to Magomed Ankalaev a little bit, but again, it was a draw in my mind. That's how I had it. But Anthony Smith won that one by TKO. Anthony Smith's leg kind of just went out anyways. Beat Thiago Santos by decision. Beat Volkan Ozdemir by decision. Beat Nikita Krylov by decision. So he has been getting a lot of decisions against higher level opponents. And I know Walker doesn't have that great of a chin, but is Ankalaev going to make that many risks on the feet to like throw in a bunch of power to try and KO Johnny Walker? I don't think so. I can see this one going to decision. I am going to take Ankalaev by decision. If he does go for takedowns, again, Johnny Walker is extremely athletic, good on the ground as well. So I think that will definitely be a pretty interesting part of this one. Maybe just guard camps and kind of just tries to avoid some of the jiu-jitsu of Johnny Walker. But I expect this one to be kind of competitive, especially for the odds on this fight. I'm actually kind of surprised because I am expecting it to be competitive, and the odds suggest that it won't. So I probably will sprinkle a little bit on Johnny Walker to see if he can get the decision win here. And I think Johnny Walker does have the ability on the feet to surprise Magomed Ankalaev and make this a super competitive fight. So I am to go with Magomed Ankalaev for my pick. But when I'm betting, I'm probably going to put a little bit on Johnny Walker. But Magomed Ankalaev, I think, will just control the fight on the feet. He does have the ability to mix in some takedowns to confuse Johnny Walker a little bit more. And I think he'll just be a little bit better at just controlling it. I know Johnny Walker will have like a whopping 7-inch reach advantage, which is actually pretty beneficial for him because he is very good on the feet. But again, I'm just going to trust in Ankalaev. I guess Johnny Walker, lost to Thiago Santos by decision. That was a couple years ago. I lost to Jamal Hill by KO, but then recently beat Ian Cutelaba by Rene Kacho, beat Paul Craig, beat Anthony Smith. Like, this is a little bit of a higher level opponent that we saw Johnny Walker losing to. But again, we saw Magomed Ankalaev beat Thiago Santos by decision. We saw him beat Anthony Smith by KO. So I'm just going to side with Magomed Ankalaev here. I don't know if he gets the finish, but I think he does go to a decision in this one. So I'm going to go with Magomed Ankalaev by decision. Up the card, we have Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev. I am going to go with Khamzat Chimaev. My pick is not changing here. Khamzat Chimaev has had like over a year, well over a year. I think his last fight was exactly a year from Kevin Holland fight. That fight was in September. It is now October, so it's been a little bit over a year, just a little bit. But he has had a whole year to kind of build himself in that middleweight division, which I think he's known where he's going to be at for quite a bit, especially after that weight miss. I think the UFC probably let him know probably around December that he's probably not going to be at welterweight, because I think that's what Colby's team as well said, like they're going to make that fight, but UFC just wanted Khamzat to move up to welterweight anyways because they didn't think he'd make the weight. So Khamzat Chimaev has known for a while that he's going to be a middleweight. He's been building into it. You've seen him bulking over the last year in that division, like on his Instagram or whatever. You've seen him bulking. Kamaru Usman, though, a welterweight, moving up to middleweight at 36 and a half years of age, isn't normally used to fighting at middleweight. Like, he doesn't have that size. He is a bigger dude for welterweight, although like it's mostly the top part of his body. Like, he definitely does make a decent weight cut. It's not like a Leon Edwards size where he's cutting quite a bit of weight and just being that much bigger at welterweight. It's not like that. But Kamaru Usman is definitely a stockier dude. Like, he's definitely bigger than what a Colby Covington. He's probably bigger than a Jorge Masvidal, probably bigger than a Gilbert Burns. So I think maybe just like right below maybe a Khamzat Chimaev and a Leon Edwards for how they cut weight. But Kamaru Usman moving up on 11 days notice, I'm not assuming that he was preparing to stay up or not stay up, but move up to middleweight in that short of time. I guess the weight cut will definitely be a little bit easier. But he wasn't building muscle to fight at the middleweight division. I think that's going to be a pretty big aspect in this matchup, especially against a bigger Khamzat Chimaev, who I think will have the ability to ragdoll Usman in this fight. I mean, I'm just going to be completely honest, and I do think he has the ability to KO Kamaru Usman in this one as well. I think Kamaru Usman at this point in his career is a lot older. He is good takedown defense, but I just think Khamzat Chimaev just being way bigger than him is going to make this really tough on Kamaru Usman, especially early on in this fight. And Kamaru Usman hasn't had the conditioning necessary. I guess these guys train year-round, so maybe I'm completely wrong there. He has been helping other guys with their training camps as well. So he probably is being completely conditioned, but it's not Khamzat Chimaev condition at middleweight. So I am going to go with Khamzat Chimaev by first-round finish. Kamaru Usman, we know his knees are kind of going. Like, you can tell the age is kind of affecting him at this point. You know, he had hand problems leading up to I think both of the Leon Edwards fights. I from what I could tell, like the second and third fight, of course, I think he did have some hand issues, which were kind of making it a little bit iffy on whether the fight was going to happen. I think it was actually the third fight mostly where we did hear about some hand issues. So, but at this point, Kamaru Usman's getting a lot of injuries. Like, we don't know how much is left in the tank there. And I think Khamzat Chimaev has the power, has the strength to either ragdoll Kamaru Usman or KO him very early. And we saw Kamaru Usman take a lot of damage, especially recently. Like, we saw that KO against Leon Edwards, but just even outside of that, took a lot of damage against Leon Edwards in their last fight. Like, a lot of the knees up the middle kind of rocked him. I think he got rocked with like an elbow too. He took a lot of damage in that fight, and I don't think a guy like Khamzat Chimaev is just going to be good for him in this one. Khamzat Chimaev has crazy power. We've seen him at middleweight before, not even built into middleweight either. We've seen him with that power at middleweight, and I think it's going to be pretty lethal against Kamaru Usman. I see a first-round finish for Khamzat Chimaev in this one. I don't see this being good for Kamaru Usman. Maybe I'm completely wrong. A lot more people than I would expect. I won't say a lot of people, but a lot more people than I would expect are picking Kamaru Usman in this one, 25%. I guess there's kind of that ability there where you'll have like a fan base, of course, that will pick Kamaru Usman, but I am relatively confident that Chimaev will win this one. Maybe I'm just completely wrong. Maybe Chimaev goes out there to get a takedown and Usman just stuffs it a little bit more. I don't think that happens, though. I'm going to go with Khamzat Chimaev. I don't think it goes to a decision. I don't know whether I'll say submission or KO. I'm going to say KO, though. I think he either catches Kamaru Usman, drops him, and then finishes him up on the ground in the first round. You know, that's exactly how I see it. I don't see a submission there at all. So it's not either or there. Maybe he just takes him down and controls him and then gets just the TKO that way. But I can see him actually catching Kamaru Usman, just like turning into a scrap, and then Chimaev just being the more durable fighter between the two, and him just KOing Usman. So I'm going to go with Chimaev by KO, 75% picked by Tapology, 40% by KO, 20% by submission, and 33% by decision. So I'm going to go with Khamzat Chimaev, first round KO. I think the power is just going to be a little bit too much for Usman at this point in his career. Durability-wise, Chimaev will just have a little bit more durability. He's a younger fighter, has been out for a year, building up for the middleweight division, and of course, going to be improving some of his skills as well. So I think he is going to be a little bit better on the feet. Like, he doesn't move his head, so there's always that opportunity for Usman to catch Khamzat Chimaev coming in. But again, as these guys get older, I don't trust Usman durability-wise, power-wise, as they would Khamzat Chimaev in this one. So I'm going to go with Khamzat Chimaev by first round KO. Up the card, we have Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski too, and this is a really great matchup. I'm surprised they're actually able to get this on short notice. Well, Volkanovski's pretty much game for anything. Like, that dude's an absolute warrior, one of the most active champs we have right now. I think probably actually the most active, because Izzy and Usman are no longer champs, but the most active champ we have. Can you say that? That's not the point. But Alexander Volkanovski coming in on 11 days notice is actually insane, especially for a champion. Like you'll never see this anywhere else in any other sport. So, or at least combat sport, you'll never really see this. So this is actually pretty incredible that the UFC were actually able to make this matchup. But I do love it. I do kind of hate it. I don't like that it was made on 11 days notice. Like, I feel like this is a really big fight that could have been built to. It would have been nice to see both of these guys have two really big training camps against each other. I know Islam Makhachev is also fighting this on short notice, but he was in a training camp. Alexander Volkanovski is coming off the couch. It won't be an excuse. I know a lot of the Dagestani fans like, okay, don't use this as an excuse that you're coming off the couch or whatever. Like, he probably won't. Like, let's be real. If it's an excuse, like, he took this fight on 11 days notice. You can see him post-surgery. Like, the dude hasn't been working out. So, use an excuse if you want. I think Alexander Volkanovski isn't going to be asking for a third fight if he does lose, if he does get destroyed. So, we'll leave it at that, but I do think Islam Makhachev will win this fight. I did pick him to beat Alexander Volkanovski in the first fight, and Volkanovski really surprised me in that one. I kind of basically said, I'm going to keep my expectations low, and hopefully Volkanovski will, like, flash something or look good. So I'm not super disappointed at the end of the day. And I'll kind of just keep it at that, especially in this one with Volkanovski coming in on 11 days notice post-surgery. Like, I think I saw something like 3 weeks ago, he got finished with surgery on his wrist or whatever. So I don't know how much I like that for Volkanovski. Volkanovski is 180 pounds, so he's pretty heavy, but how much is that muscle? Like, how much conditioning does he necessarily have at this point? I don't know. I'm going to be completely honest. I am kind of worried about Volkanovski. Islam Makhachev, of course, was training for a Charles Oliveira. It's a lot of power on the feet, more of a pressure fighter, which I'll say Alexander Volkanovski kind of is the same thing there. Like, Islam Makhachev has fought Volkanovski, but when you're really training against a guy like Charles Oliveira, it's a little bit of a different matchup. Like, you're more training on ground game of Oliveira, like the jiu-jitsu, and then the stand-up where you're just going to walk you down in that power. Alexander Volkanovski, it's a little bit different. Volkanovski's a smaller dude. I don't think that changes too much in Islam Makhachev's camp, but it's going to be harder to get takedowns. I did mention that in last video, but Volkanovski, I don't know. I wish this was a training camp, but again, it's better to have this fight on the card than not. So I'm gonna have to go with Islam Makhachev. I don't know if he gets the finish. Part of me thinks that he could just get a second round submission, third round submission. I'm gonna go with a second or third round submission. It's not. I just don't think Volkanovski is as prepared for this matchup. It's not an excuse. Well, it is kind of an excuse because he is coming off the couch after surgery, but it's not anything to put against Islam Makhachev. It's more something like I can't really pick Volkanovski with all these factors, and I do think Islam Makhachev being out for, a year now? 8 months? Has been training pretty decently, and you have seen him improve quite a bit. I mean, just skills in general. Like, obviously, he's always training, but from that first Charles Oliveira fight, and I when I rewatched it leading up to the Charles Oliveira fight versus Islam Makhachev 2, I was like, Oliveira, that was the real chance for someone to beat Islam Makhachev. I'm going to be completely honest. Like, Oliveira kind of fumbled it a little bit more there. Islam Makhachev did not look great on the feet, and then in the Alexander Volkanovski fight, he looked much better on the feet. And I think you can still get a lot of sloppiness out of Islam Makhachev. I think you can kind of bait him into a lot of bad combinations that he's kind of had problems doing in his whole career. Like, you saw that fight that he did lose by KO a very, very, very long time ago against Adriano Martins, where he just spammed the same combo. I think if you make this a scrap against Islam Makhachev, he's a very defensive guy. So he's basically going to wait for you to make the first strike, make the first punch, and then he's going to try and be a little bit more defensive, look for takedowns first. So Islam Makhachev is basically going to wait for an opening to appear, and then he's going to go. If you do make this a scrap, it's going to be a little bit more confusing for Islam Makhachev, and it's going to get a little bit sloppy, and that's where you do see the sloppiness come out a little bit more. But if Alexander Volkanovski can come out there, not as conditioned of a fighter, which is a factor you kind of have to take in here, comes out there, tries to make this a scrap again like he did in the first fight, he'll definitely have some success here. And I do want to see what a second fight does look for Alexander Volkanovski. And if he does pull this out, he's got to be one of the greatest of all time. Like, I think it's pretty finalized at that point. Maybe if he gets a defense at lightweight, you can kind of put him in the top 5 or whatever, but that's kind of speaking a little too far. I don't think he wins this one. I'm going to go Makhachev by like a second or third round submission. I'll probably say third round submission. I think he just ends up getting Volkanovski down like he did in the first fight, and I don't think Volkanovski is going to have like the training camp that he didn't have in the first fight, where he's going to be able to defend as many submissions. And I think the improvements kind of edge more to Islam Makhachev. I know both these guys can kind of come away from that last fight and gain quite a bit, but I just think Makhachev is just going to be the more conditioned fighter. And I think he's going to be ready for a guy in Alexander Volkanovski more than Volkanovski would have to be ready for a guy in Makhachev, if that makes kind of sense. Like, Makhachev, heavy wrestling, good sambo, of course, like the wrestling, the submission ability. Those are some really big factors, and the fact that he can kind of dictate the fight, and Alexander Volkanovski has to go forward. He did take a little bit of damage against Islam Makhachev in that fight. Didn't really take too much damage against Yahya Rodriguez, so he has been able to recover for a little bit. But again, he's an older fighter, 35 years of age, just turned. Islam Makhachev, 31 years of age, so he's still pretty young, almost 32, entering his prime of his career. I'm going to have to go with Islam Makhachev by third round submission. I'm going to keep my expectations low for Volkanovski and hope he impresses again, but I do see a finish happening in this one. Normally you see a decision in that first fight, and especially in, like, I don't know how to explain this. If you see a decision in the first fight, the second fight you kind of expect a finish. Same thing. the other way around, like a finish in the first fight, you kind of expect a decision in the second fight. So I'm going to go with the finish by Islam Makhachev, 3rd round submission. Let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Pretty split on Tapology. I kind of understand it. A lot of people did think Volkanovski won that fight, but I'm going to have to go with Makhachev by submission. I can see going to a decision as well. Volkanovski just toughing it out, but again, he's coming off the couch and off of a surgery very recently. So I'm going to have to go with Makhachev by submission in the 3rd round. 56% of people on Tapology are picking him. Let me know what you guys think about this main event down below, and I'll see you guys next time.